Hi, I'm LeBang, and I'm going to tell you about the world of Healing Blade. So, the premise of the game is that there are two warring sides. These sides consist of the Pestilence and the Apothecaries. These sides are fighting to gain control of the land of Soma, which is Latin for body. The Apothecaries are the traditional good guys, and they're based off of antibiotics that help fight infections in the body. The Lords of Pestilence are the bad guys, and they're based off of pathogens that infect the body. Each side starts with 10 life points, and the purpose of each player is to reduce the opponent's life points down to 0. For the purpose of the tournament, the time for each gameplay will be 15 minutes, and the opponent with the highest number of life points will move on to the next round. Now let's take a look at what's in each Healing Blade set.
Hi, my name is James.
And I'm Helen.
And we're here to tell you about what's in each Healing Blade set.
When you open up a Healing Blade set, you should be able to find 2 playmats,
20 ATP gems, which are the energy sources that are used in the Healing Blade world.
and 2 decks of cards.
One set holds the Apothecaries, which has a white background.
And the other set is the Pestilence, which has a black background.
As Helen just said, there are 2 types of decks, but the cards all have similar features that we will go over right now.
Hi, I'm Sunny.
And I'm Dorothy.
Now we're going to go into the different types of cards in Healing Blade.
There are 3 types of cards that can be in play: the combatant card, the spell card, and the item card.
Let's take a closer look.
First, there are the spell cards, which last for 1 round and take effect immediately based on the rules of the cards. All spell cards are placed into the discard zone after use, unless otherwise noted on the card.
All item cards are similar to spell cards, except that they remain in play unless destroyed by your opponent.
Finally, there are combatant cards. The text box of these cards differ a little bit depending on whether you're playing Apothecaries or Pestilence. We'll start by describing Pestilence.
These are the more straightforward cards. There are only 2 categories that are listed in the text box. One looks like this. This describes the various antibiotics that can kill the bacteria. So if you know that your opponent has an antibiotic that is listed in this section, you want to try and avoid playing the card. The other category listed in the text box looks like this. These are descriptions of the various pestilence, often providing the symptoms that are associated with this pathogen.
For Apothecaries, there are 3 different categories that the text box describes. First, there are the bacteria that are listed in the first line of attack, which is represented by the green box 1. Then, there are bacteria that are listed in the second line of attack, which is represented by the yellow box 2. These describe how effective the antibiotics are at blocking the attacks by the pestilence. Finally, there is this symbol, which serves the same purpose as the one from the pestilence, providing some background that ties the game back to a real-world application.
Now that we know the basics of the game, let's try going through a round of gameplay.
Greetings, mortals. I am Zuchen, the Lord of Pestilence.
And I am Jan, the Apothecary.
We will begin by setting up our tables like thus.
First, we take our decks and place them in the deck zone.
Then, we each place 10 ATP counters in our ATP zone. As the fearsome Lord of Pestilence, I will begin by drawing 6 cards. I will then place as many combatants into the sanctuary as I wish, provided I have sufficient ATP. I will begin by placing this card into the sanctuary, requiring 1 ATP, followed by this card, which requires 2 ATP, followed by this, which requires 1, and lastly, this, which requires 3. As you can see, I have yet to use all of my ATP, but I've played all the combatants that I wish, and I will yield my turn to my opponent.
Like my opponent, I will start by drawing 6 cards. I decide to use this combatant, which costs 4 ATP, this one, which costs 3, and I will end with this one, which costs 2. Like my opponent, I have not used all my ATP.
As the Lord of Pestilence, I will move all of my combatants into the battlefield.
And I will move my combatants to the battlefield. However, I do have one stipulation. As the apothecary, I can move at most 3 combatants to the battlefield at one time.
Both players turn all their cards face up in the battlefield zone. For each Lords of Pestilence combatant card present in the battlefield, 1 point of life damage will be dealt to the apothecary player. However, if the apothecary player has a combatant card that can counteract the pestilence one, damage will be dealt to the pestilence player. Depending on the line of defense, the apothecary can either deal 1 point of damage or 2 points of damage to the pestilence. If it is first line, 2 points of damage will be inflicted. If it is second line, 1 point of damage will be inflicted.
It seems my opponent can do a maximum of 4 damage to my life points. However, my vancomycin counters his S. pyogenes with a second line of defense, and it also counters his S. aureus with a first line of defense. Likewise, my erythromycin can counter his C. jejuni with a second line of defense. That means I can do a total of 4 damage to your life points.
Bah! Why must my minions be so weak? I need to protect my life points. This means I will need to sacrifice monsters so that their total ATP cost is equal or greater than the ATP cost of my opponent's antibiotic. Since vancomycin has an ATP cost of 4, that means I will need to sacrifice both S. aureus and C. jejuni to negate my opponent's attack, and I will do so. However, with my remaining combatants, I no longer have sufficient total ATP cost to block another attack, so I must take 1 damage to my life points. On a darker note, my P. motocida still is unblocked and deals 1 damage to Jan. Take that.
Oh dear, this won't do at all. For the greater good, I must protect my life points. I think I will sacrifice one of my combatants to negate his P. motocida's attack. To do that, I will sacrifice my penicillin, which has an ATP cost of 2, the same as his combatant. This negates the attack, but I must discard my penicillin.
The combatant phase ends and they both move their combatants back into the sanctuary. A new round begins with each player receiving 1 ATP.
And I also get an extra ATP for inflicting 1 damage onto your life points.
And I get nothing.
We move on to a new summoning phase. In this phase, players who find themselves deficient in ATPs can request more. However, whatever one player receives, the other player does too.
Mwahahaha! I have drawn the undefeatable card. You will suffer. But before I can play this card, I will need to begin by requesting 4 additional rounds of ATP. This means that my opponent also receives 4 additional ATP. I will then play this combatant, which requires 4 ATP. And I end my summoning phase.
Seems my opponent has summoned a fearful monster. I will need to summon a new combatant. I choose to summon this one, which costs 3 ATP. And with that, I end my turn. It seems that my opponent has summoned Shigella. However, my new combatant, Ampicillin, actually counters that.
It's a shame that my minions are so weak. Looks like I gotta do everything by myself these days. But have no fear, I have one last trick up my sleeve. By paying 3 ATP points, I will play the Resistance Plasmid magical item on my Shigella, giving it resistance to Ampicillin. Since it is a magical item card, I can play this at any time during my combat phase, so long as I have sufficient ATP, which I did. Even better than that though, this magical item will remain on my Shigella for the duration of the game, so long as my opponent does not remove it. Take that.
My opponent has played an excellent move. However, I too have an ace up my sleeve. I play the Broad Spectrum Therapy card. By using 2 ATP, I can remove any magical item from my opponent's battlefield. I think I'll choose the Resistance Plasmid.
What? No! How dare you! I will make you suffer for this!
Shigella is now countered by my Ampicillin once again. However, since Broad Spectrum Therapy card is the spell card, I must discard it immediately after use.
Gameplay continues until a player has lost all of their life points or 15 minutes is up.
I win!
No!